Welcome to On Point. I'm your host, Roger McConnell, and I'll be here every other Tuesday at 1 p.m. with topical shows addressing the needs and concerns of military veterans and active duty personnel.
Today, my guest is Vietnam combat veteran Rod Melchert of Roscoe, Montana, or down there someplace.
Yeah.
Welcome, Rod.
Welcome.
Anyhow, as I said before, welcome to On Point Veterans Talk Radio. You, sir, had a very unique job in our military forces. You were a
Cobra pilot.
A Cobra pilot. And for those of you who don't know what Cobras are, that was the baddest helicopter on the planet, and arguably could still be, right? Maybe behind the Apache, or what would you?
Right. I would say the Apache and then the Cobra.
Okay. Yeah.
But at the time, in 1969, it was the Cadillac of all gunships in the world.
That I know. I was in Vietnam when they introduced them there. But let's back up a little while. Where'd you grow up? Let's talk a little bit about your childhood and what molded you into a potential Cobra pilot.
Overland Park, Kansas.
Overland Park, Kansas. Okay. School. What'd you do? Would you excel at anything in school? Were you an average student or what?
No, I was a good student. Schooling has always come easy to me.
And you didn't drink, or you pretty?
No, back in those years, I graduated in 1965. We didn't really drink or smoke cigarettes and chase girls, but we didn't.
Well, you found lots of trouble if you were chasing girls, especially if you caught any of them. But you joined college. You went to school.
I went to school.
Where was that?
Emporia,
Kansas.
And I played the game of not being a student, and I was relieved of my duty.
So you were booted out unceremoniously. Mm-hmm. So here you are, kind of floating out there, and you decide to. They were talking about drafting you.
Yeah, and back in those days, they were drafting high draft numbers, and I had a medium draft number, so I knew I was going. So I went ahead and just joined.
And you joined the Army.
Army.
And your basic training then was?
Fort Leonard Wood,
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So after basic, you went to AIT, and it was Advanced Individual Training for what now?
Infantry.
Infantry. Boy, that was quite a future mapped out for you. But you had tested, and after AIT, you had the aptitude, and they asked you to
go to Officer Candidate School.
Officer Candidate School. And that probably took a while, didn't it?
Yes, that took almost 8 months, and that was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was the Infantry Officer Candidate School.
So you were thinking that you were going to be an infantry officer in Vietnam. You knew by then you would probably end up in Vietnam.
Yes, all the officers went to Vietnam, as far as the young officers.
Right. Well, that had to be a little scary in itself with your prospects. I wouldn't have wanted to have been an infantry officer in Vietnam. What was the life expectancy?
About 8 days.
That's what I've heard too, just a very, very short period of time. So they ask you to go to, after you finish your OCS, they ask you to go
to flight school.
Flight school. And your life expectancy was probably 9 days in that. But you go to flight school. Where was that?
Fort Walters, Texas was the first half of the flight school. And Savannah Beach, Georgia was the second half of the flight school. And it lasted 8 months.
The flight school altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Anything in particular? Did anything change your mind, or did you get increasingly excited about the prospect of flying a helicopter in Vietnam?
Increasingly excited. All the pilots were on TDY, which means we already had our orders to Vietnam while in flight school. And so it was a big party time. It was a lot of fun.
A lot of esprit de corps when you were in there, a lot of rah-rah. And
Yeah.
I think at that time we thought it was going to be a real quick end to that war.
A quick hitter.
Yeah, a quick hitter. I like that phrase. That we were going to be in and out of there in months, kick the commies' butts, and come home to a big parade. Didn't work out that way. But after your flight school, then you did go to Vietnam.
Yes, I left for Vietnam January 2nd, 1969.
Okay. And you got to Saigon probably, or Da Nang? Which word did you
Saigon.
land? And did you already have a duty assignment at that point? Or?
No, we went to battalion headquarters, and he said, the colonel said, oh, there were two of us that I went to flight, another guy I went to flight school with. And he said, okay, your buddy here is going to Cu Chi, and you're going to Rocket City.
Rocket City. That sounds like the Rockettes or
It was Tay Ninh
Tay Ninh.
on the Cambodian border.
Okay, so that's where you ended up.
Right.
And did Rocket City live up to its name?
Every night.
Every night. Oh, wow. Any close calls?
Yes, we had a Chinese 122 rocket come in, and it hit our fire truck right in front of the officers' quarters. But we were so used to the incoming rounds. That one got our attention, but we got hit every morning and about every night when we come back in.
Morning, no noon?
No noon.
Noon missions. That was a blessing.
It's too hot for the Vietnamese.
Yeah, it was too hot for all of us. But let's see. God, it must be an incredible sensation. So you started flying when you first got to Rocket City. What did you fly?
I flew lift Hueys,
Okay, that was inserting, most of the time, inserting
Inserting-
infantrymen.
inserting them into LZs that we had pre-designated and pre-shot artillery on. And then we would come and pick them up or move them 2 or 3 times a day.
Did you take a lot of incoming fire when you were inserting these guys?
Yes,
Or
in
picking them up?
the LZs themselves.
Right. God, that must be a scary thing, watching those big green bubbles coming at you. The green color tracer rounds of the
Roger,
communist.
it will get your attention.
I believe that. You didn't fly the lift ships long, though.
No, I flew the lift ships for 2 months, and then they decided I was going to be a gunship pilot. And so I went to the gunship platoon, and we were flying Charlie model Hueys, which was pretty weak and pretty ammunition-wise. We didn't have the firepower.
They just didn't have the lift to be able to carry that much weight?
Right.
Okay. So the Charlie model, that was a pretty good bird, though. It was a good weapon.
Yeah. For its time.
For its time. They would, I think you said they had 9 rockets per pod?
Yeah, 18 rockets and
Okay.
2 M60 machine guns.
Now, yours weren't fitted with the miniguns, your
Not yet.
Charlie models. I think ours were, because I vaguely remember something along the lines of having them go through and put down a whole lot of firepower, walking down on the tracers.
As much as you want.
6,000 rounds per minute on the miniguns. I think that's a lot of stuff coming down. Anything happen exciting? Are you still doing the same thing? You were flying cover for the troops, or?
Flying cover for the troops and picking out LZs in the morning, and calling in artillery for the troops. And then we woke up one morning and there were 6 brand new Cobras sitting on the runway.
Wow. Those were beautiful.
The only problem was none of us had gone to Cobra transition school. And so I got picked, and I went to transition school in country Vietnam, Vung Tau, for 3 weeks.
Okay, were they a lot harder to fly?
The front seats were harder to fly. As you know, they were lined up tandem, and the front seats had little bitty hold-on sticks, whereas the rear seat, the commander of the aircraft itself, had a regular, just like a Huey.
Okay.
It had a different rotor system that gave it much more power and much more speed.
So it could fly higher too, I would assume.
Well, no, you got a limitation of, supposed to have a limitation of 10,000 feet because you run out of oxygen.
Okay. But they would fly, they would get out of the, like if you took off at the same time, they would lift out a whole lot quicker.
You leave them in the dirt, right?
You needed that speed in those. That was an amazing ship, and you guys were getting a lot of stuff thrown up at you in the clouds there, trying to knock you out of them.
And we took our fair share.
Now, describe a typical mission from start to finish.
Okay, a typical mission would be up early in the morning, go out and find the CNC ship, command and control ship, and they thought they had the LZ marked. They would then call me over and describe the landing zone to me, and I would tell the lift ships to head this way and give them a coordination, and go on out and start the artillery on the landing zone. And then I would go and pick up the slicks, Hueys, and take them on in to the LZ and let the infantrymen patrol and recon and things like that. And again, we stayed on station with them in case they got in trouble, and we could shoot for them.
You would have to go back and refuel, though. How long could you fly?
We could fly 3 hours.
3 hours.
So we would go back and refuel and rearm ourselves and go back out and fly over them in case they got in trouble.
Now, let's compare the Huey Cobra versus the Huey C model. I think you said there was about a significant faster speed.
It's a Volkswagen compared to a Mercedes-Benz.
What was the top speed in the C model?
Probably it started shaking real bad, about 120 knots.
Okay, and the Cobra was good up until?
180.
180 knots, which is how many miles per hour? About 200, I think. Isn't it? That's fast. Yeah, but I bet it felt slow when those green balls were coming up at you, those green tracers. Yeah, well, crazy. Tell me about the armament, about what you were armed with on the Cobra.
We had 4 big rocket pods carrying 19 rockets each, 2 on each side. Then we had a minigun in front, and we had a 40 millimeter cannon in front. It was actually a grenade launcher.
Yeah, grenade launcher. Now, I think you told me that the grenade launcher didn't work real well.
I had a lot of jams with the grenade launcher, and it's really hard to jam up a minigun. And the rockets, of course, they're just gone out.
I have seen films of those rockets, and they look like they're going everywhere but where they wanted them to go.
Once you shoot a few, you know what you're doing. You could hit a building easily at 3/4 of a mile out.
Wow. Okay. What was the sight like on those? How did you know you were on the target?
The tandem uniformity of the 2 pilots, the rear aircraft commander almost always shot the rockets, and it had a large aperture that you would can you?
You could put it right. You could set it on the target as such. And then you say you could nail, you got 76 rockets on board, 2.75 inches, I think you told me.
Folding fin aerial rockets.
Wow. And they would, what would, I don't know, we didn't talk a kill radius on those rockets when they would impact.
It's like it's almost equivalent to a 105 howitzer.
Okay, that's a good analogy there. That's an amazing aircraft. Do you know how the new Hueys compare? They've got
They've beefed them
twin-inch.
up,
They got 4 blades on the rotors, right?
and they can now carry big cannon, anti-tank cannons,
Oh.
20 millimeter.
Okay.
Whereas we tried it, and it just shook that Cobra to death. It wasn't made for that.
Yeah.
It was going to be one of the Army's experiments.
Those 20 millimeter cannons, I was supported by those on an occasion, and they hit hard. That's an impressive. When they roll over with a 20 millimeter, it's zowie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me reintroduce my guest. We're pretty much halfway through the interview now, and I'd like to once again acquaint my guest with Mr. Rod Melchert. I apologize
That's
again.
all right.
Okay, you fly in combat for 9 months, about a little more. A little more. Okay.
Your duty is exactly 1 year to the date.
Yeah, right. You're staying country. You had bullets impact your Cobra on how many different occasions would you guess?
15.
15 occasions. You got no real close calls, though.
No real structural damage, and I only had one pilot, front seat pilot. We called them bullet catchers, that that got hit.
He did get hit. Did he? How badly hurt was he?
He took it through the legs.
Okay. So, you ever stay in touch with him or anything like that? If you know if he's okay?
I don't know.
Yeah, we'd lose track of each other, don't we? You never got shot down.
No.
You did have some issues. Mechanical?
Yeah, mechanical issues. The helicopter has so many moving parts, and like I told you, Roger, a helicopter beats the air into submission. It doesn't fly. And if you think about it, it's they've done research on them, and it's amazing it does fly.
You told me there's a lot of maintenance involved with helicopter,
w-
keeping them in the air.
I would say that there's 2 hours of ground maintenance and inspections for every hour of flight.
That just seems impossible. I don't know what the jets are like in the Air Force, but that just seems so heavy duty but each hour they're up there, the number of lives you guys saved, we on the ground considered you guys our angels, and I'm serious. The helicopter pilots and you jet pilots that bailed us out of some really nasty stuff. So
We were just doing our job and what we were trained to do without a thought.
it was, whether you were thinking or not, it was nice to have you up there because you saved a lot of lives. So thank you. So you flew roughly, you got a day off a week. You flew
Yeah,
how many days? 6 days a week. How many hours a day?
it could vary depending if they got in trouble or if we had to go pick them up or we didn't have to stay on station with them. It could be anywhere from 4 to 10.
That's a lot of flying time.
You're exhausted.
Oh, I believe. I'm sure it was much the same with you guys when you're up there and you're in we were down there, but when we were in the midst of a fight, time stood still.
Yes, it
It
does.
just, your adrenaline was pumping so fast, your mind, it was like almost capturing a slow motion movie of everything, which if you do that with a movie camera, you're shooting more frames per minute. So I think your brain is on overdrive when you're in those things, and it's shooting a lot of frames per minute because everything drags.
Well, and there's so much going on. Starting artillery, cutting off artillery, because I don't want those lift ships with those infantrymen on there when the artillery's still hitting the LZ.
Well, that's right. You don't want them blowing up our own guys. So anything else you'd like to say about what happened over there? I know you had some scary scenes, and I know you got into the point where you were taking on the bad guys and knocking them out. Would you like to go into any of that?
Sure. The Vietnamization part of the war started, and so we were using a lot of Vietnamese troops and lifting a lot of Vietnamese troops.
In the slicks.
In the slicks. And they would jump out of the slicks and go sit in the woods. They didn't want to fight. And then we got into the point of body count. And that, to me, that was an ugly part of the war, because an eligible male is anything from 16 to 60.
In terms of a target?
Yes.
Okay. For us, one of our targets. Okay.
One of our targets. And the war took a big change. The North Vietnamese were a fighting machine. They didn't want to fight World War II tactics. They wanted to fight hit and run.
Guerrilla
and
tactics.
Come find me in the jungle.
Yeah, that's what they did for sure. So it was your job. Could you see them from up there? What was
It's
it easier?
amazing. Very seldom.
Would you see one in the open?
Yeah. And understand that they could hear us coming 5 miles away. There's a distinct sound to a Huey. And, and you've heard it. And so I'm sure that they just melted into the jungle.
Yeah, I believe that.
And it was their country. They knew the jungle, and they knew how to fight in the jungle.
They knew where they were going. Okay, you finish your tour of duty, 1 year. You come home. 1970 about, I think you were there in 1969.
January 3rd, 1970, I came home.
Okay, and then you start doing what?
I started flying again.
Yeah.
I'm an instructor pilot at Fort Walters, Texas, and I did that for 2 years.
Whoa. 2 years, and I think I remember you saying in our discussions that you just absolutely loved it.
I loved instructing because you got guys that had never even been in a helicopter, and you took them from day one, and they all knew they were going back to Vietnam. And so they were like your children. This is the way I treated all my pilots. And the first bunch of pilots I had are going to be pilots were American pilots. And then we changed over to NATO pilots from Europe. And then we changed over to Vietnamese pilots. And that was, it got to be not as much fun.
Probably so. But you must have felt like you needed to get these guys ready. You had aged.
Yes.
Yeah, you grew up in a hurry over there. And so you probably did feel like these guys' dad, but you got them ready, and you felt like you did, or you wouldn't have been so proud of what you did. Yeah. So, but most of us, you had nightmares after you got home.
Yes.
Okay. What did you think about that? Did you just think that was going to be part of your life for the rest of it?
Yeah, I thought it was merely a reoccurrence of events in Vietnam, and it was no big deal.
You just live with it, tough it out. But it's gotten worse?
Yes, it's gotten worse. When you get more time on your hands, your mind starts thinking more.
Yeah, exactly. You had a long career, though, after you got home as a
I got out of the Army and I went to veterinary school.
Cool, yeah. So you were a vet for 31 years?
31 years.
Large or small animals?
Small only.
Okay, cats and dogs. Viva cats and dogs. Your PTSD, we talked about this before. The first time you noticed it, I think you were 5 years ago, and you were in...
I was in a combination barbershop, manicure shop, and I walked in, and I heard that sing-song language, and it was all Vietnamese, and they owned the place. And boy, the memories just nearly threw me on the floor, and I couldn't go in there ever again.
I had a friend see a Vietnamese guy in a bar in Kansas City right after he got home from being shot through and through when his Vietnamese troops left him. This guy picked this Vietnamese guy up and threw him through a window in this, wherever they were in Kansas City. Did you?
No, I have
that?
no animosity toward the Vietnamese.
Yeah, well, it was just an experience in life, and it wasn't their fault. We were all kind of swept up in it, and there's now we can make a little more sense of it, but at the time, nobody could make any sense of it.
No, there was no sense to be made. And Washington stopped us as far as continuing the war. And as I came home in 1970, the demonstrations, and it was a very anti-war atmosphere in the United States.
Yeah, I remember that, the Kent State thing, and I don't know what year that was. Was that after you came home?
I think it was.
Right before?
I think I was in Vietnam then.
Okay. That was an awful place to be when you knew everybody at home was demonstrating against what you were doing. Talk about not feeling supported. I know.
The Army.
The Army.
The Army didn't tell us what was going on, and we had no TV, so it wasn't the television war that the civilians here knew of.
Okay, so we weren't privy to information. I think the information we got was from people who were coming in as replacements. There wasn't anything on TV. They didn't want to expose us to that and further ruin our morale. But we got bits and pieces of what was going on, and it didn't sound good. We heard of the hippies, and I guess you were there for part of the hippie scene before you even went to Vietnam.
Right.
Yeah, well, that was all brand new to me when I got home. In any event, let's look back on the whole experience. What was your worst day that you can remember?
The day I came home.
The day you came home. Why do you say that?
Because I left my guys.
Okay. Yeah, I hear that. Well, thank you for taking time to do this, Mr. Rod Melchert. I sure appreciate it. You were a Cobra pilot in Vietnam. You did your duty, and welcome home, my friend.
Thank you.
On Point continues to air every other Tuesday at 1 p.m. on Montana Public Radio, KGPR, Great Falls. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future shows, please contact me, Roger McConnell, at 406-799-6709 or an email onpointkgpr@bresnan.net.